Coming up on this edition of VCU In Depth, documentaries from students in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture.
First, we'll take an intimate look at what it means to be prepared for someone's passing.
And then, we'll take a bite out of a popular Richmond sandwich that this food capital claims as its own.
VCU In Depth begins right now. Good evening and welcome to VCU In Depth. I'm Will Hicks.
And I'm Tina Harding. Thanks for joining us as we feature documentaries from undergraduate students in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture. Death happens to everyone, but often people are unprepared for what that means for themselves and their loved ones. According to a 2017 study by the National Funeral Directors Association, 62.5% of consumers felt it was very important to communicate their funeral plans and wishes to their family members prior to their own death.
Even with more than 50% of consumers believing in its importance, only about 20% of consumers actually follow through in sharing their afterlife care plan. Our first documentary this evening is called Directing Death. It goes behind the scenes of a local funeral home to showcase what planning a funeral really entails.
In 2014, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. In 2016, it had metastasized to my liver. And in 2017, it was in my lungs. I've gone through chemotherapy twice. I've had 2 massive surgeries to remove it. And it's still here. We all know, I am dying and we all know this. When is it time to just call it off?
Morissette Life Celebration Funeral Home, Mrs. Shannon.
When I was younger, we didn't really have that much of a taboo around death, and so here I am. That's what happens when you die. I think a lot of it just has to do with death is scary and it's sad, and I think we live in a society, especially now, where if you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to.
Our profession's been so quiet and hidden for a really long time, and that's one reason I thoroughly enjoy the fact that younger people are coming into this profession, because I think we need to be more open and honest, and death education needs to be a thing. Teach everybody about sex, but you don't teach anybody about death.
Funeral directors aren't scary people, and for the most part, a lot of us just really want to educate you. At least, I want to educate people, and so just to not be afraid to ask those questions and look for those answers.
We play a lot of roles in our day. We comfort the family, and then we also have to gather vital information for death certificates, and then we deal with the state and the legal side of death. So it's just something different all the time. And we joke about the many different hats that we wear. I can be a pseudotherapist one day, and the next day I'm, all business, and then the next day I can be directing a funeral and have to be a celebrant / pastor for the day.
I worked on funerals, so as a funeral assistant, and then I became an intern, and so she worked over at Dale Memorial Park. And that's how I met her, because she was one of the people that would come out to the gravesides when we were there. And so we would just chat during, while we were waiting for the grave to close. You just talk to the people at the cemetery, and so that's kind of how I knew her.
Since we last spoke, I've been to hospital, I've been to ER, and I was extremely dehydrated, I was very ill. Turns out after doing a CAT scan that my cancer is much more advanced than we thought. Obviously I need help breathing. I don't take in enough oxygen all by myself. I also take steroids to kind of keep that, to stay breathing. They say it's good. You're supposed to do it every day, in and out. It progressed to the point where I could no longer maintain a job.
And
I can't breathe. I can't you know, do things. I can't lift and carry anymore. I could have gone back on traditional chemotherapy to buy some time. As a personal choice, that's not how I want to spend my end of time. I had blood in my poop. And nobody wants to talk about your poop or your butthole or go to see the doctor. There's a special doctor just for your back door.
The most common way how it's been found out is that people get some kind of abdominal symptoms. They get some pains, they don't feel good, they see blood in the stool, and that's where they start losing weight. These are the signs of manifested colon cancer. There's of course a big effort in human mankind to detect it before that. That's why we are supposed to run to colonoscopies once we're 50. You know, and if we have a family history, that alters depending on what the family history is.
Was cancer something that was genetic in your family?
I have no idea. I'm adopted.
Do you think knowing that now, that like finding your family history earlier would have been something that you would?
I gave it a lot of thought. Always thought I had more time. You know, and Larry from Morissette and I even talked about that, like go find your family. And I've had to sit with my kids, like now anytime you do a physical, you got to check the yes box. It runs in your family now. I regret waiting as long as I did. I will also say this to anybody. If something just doesn't feel right, seem right, go get it checked. Don't be embarrassed. Don't worry about the insurance. Go get it checked. If I'd have gotten on this maybe 5 years earlier than I really did, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you. I could have caught it when it was early.
I'll specifically ask, okay, are you looking to do burial? Are you looking to do cremation? And then depending on what they say, that kind of leads where the next part is going.
Both my parents were cremated, and that's kind of what I wanted. I don't want to, like, hair and makeup and people fool with me. And when my mother passed, she had taken care of pretty much everything, and I walked into a different funeral home that, and just put a folder on the table, and it was done. All done. And I want to do that for my children. I want it my way, but I don't want them to have to worry. You just lost your mom. Don't have to worry about anything. It's done. It's taken care of. All of it. It should be that way.
People think that people die and they come to the funeral home and that's kind of like the end of it. Like the body just goes away. That's not the case. With cremation, there are several rules and laws and regulations. There's an entire code of cremation for the state of Virginia.
There's just so many steps that need to happen before a cremation occurs that, for the most part, it usually takes about 2 or 3 days if everything falls in line for it to go through.
We place most of our decedents in what's called an alternative container. It's like a corrugated cardboard box with a piece of plywood in the bottom to help support the weight of the decedent. Even with cremation, people don't realize you can still have traditional services. You can still have a visitation with the body present. You can still have a church service. All of those things can take place prior to cremation, or they can still take place after cremation in the form of a memorial service.
It'll be non-secular, I guess, non-religious. We aren't all religious, or we're not all the same religion. So just hey, she was a great gal, you know, that kind of thing.
Part of the arrangements, like if people come in and say they, you know, you ask them like, wait, do you want our regular hearse, or we have a motorcycle hearse? And for the most part, people are like, oh, you know, no, I just want the regular hearse. But we've had people specifically come in and say, I want to come here because of your motorcycle hearse.
It is something that Morissette has, and if you ask for it, they'll offer it to you.
I mean, it fits her. It does fit her. She's sassy enough for it.
I get a big pretty jar, and my children get a small pretty jar that looks just like it, but tiny. So they get to keep a little bit of me.
This is the coin. We just put it with all of our cremated remains, or all of our bodies before they're cremated. So they have their own identification number, and then it stays with them throughout the whole cremation process. The crematory also has their own coin, and then after the cremation, they're zip tied to the the bag that the cremated remains are in.
The rest of me goes in a niche, which is like a little cubby hole with a seal and door on the outside. I have a little plaque with my name on it. It says the Queen of Everything. True story.
So a niche is like, it's kind of like a mausoleum where they have, you know, if you go to a cemetery, they'll have the big parts for bodies that will go in, but a niche is just kind of a smaller hole in the wall, I guess you would say. Like a columbarium is, but a niche is kind of where you would put cremated remains.
If you want to go to Europe or you want to go do something, do it. Don't wait. Don't stick it on a credit card, take out a banknote, whatever it takes. This sneaks up on you. Life sneaks up on you when you're not looking. Do it. Don't wait.
We're all mortal. You know, death is a part of life, and life is a part of death. You know, it all goes hand in hand, so it's something that we need to be aware of and just think about. Not in a negative way, but just in a real way. It's all going to happen.
I'm Bill Oglesby, an associate professor in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture and the instructor for the documentary class. Joining me tonight are Jackie Petrus, Erin McEwen, and Yasmin Rowe, who produced the Directing Death documentary, which is not an easy subject to do, right? I mean, it's a little tough. And you know, let's hand it to Winnie, who is facing so much difficulty and yet was willing to take time to not just talk to you, but share it with people. Jackie, was it hard to talk to her, knowing the kinds of difficulties she's facing?
Yeah, so we knew going into it that the topic in general was going to be very difficult, and we wanted to make sure we handled it correctly and respectfully, and finding her was incredible. She was so open and so honest with us, and by the end of it we got very comfortable with each other, and she was able to elaborate a little bit more about her situation. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. That was really impressive. Erin, was there anything that you learned while making this documentary that you found particularly interesting?
Yeah, I mean, we learned so much. I think I went into it not knowing a whole lot about the whole industry. So learning that you can have all of the traditional services when you are doing a cremation. And actually, we learned that you can rent out coffins, which is something that I had never heard of. And a lot of people just aren't aware all of the options that are out there.
Yeah, I guess, you know, unless you're in that situation where you're facing that, you don't necessarily know what's available, right? Yeah. Yasmin, how about, you know, looking ahead from making a documentary like this? Does it change you in some way? Does it change the way you look at death and dying?
To be honest, it really validated the way that I kind of think about death in terms of I'm usually kind of whatever will be. And so it was honestly very fulfilling for me to have these conversations with somebody like Winnie and somebody in her situation to, you know, just go forward and really validate the way that I feel about things.
Was did it turn out the way you envisioned it at the beginning, or did it change as you went along? And that happens a lot with documentaries.
I think we started off with a very different, same like perspective of wanting to talk about like the funeral industry and things like that, but we kind of shifted as time went on, and we found Winnie, and our whole situation really did change, and we kind of shifted into talking about her and the whole funeral director process in general.
Okay, well, nice, sensitive job, guys. I've been speaking with Robertson School students and documentary producers Jackie Petrus, Erin McEwen, and Yasmin Rowe. I know it wasn't easy, and thanks for it.
Thanks, Dr. Oglesby. Next up this evening, we're serving a Richmond favorite that's nearly a decade old. This documentary explores the legend behind one of the city's most historic foods.
Warning, we do advise our audience to consume this next feature with caution, as certain images could cause excessive drooling for some of our viewers. But please, settle yourselves in tuck your napkins in your collar, and enjoy another sandwich for the sailors. Bon appetit!
In a world where delicacy is defined by the latest Instagram food trend, there's a sandwich that says no. I won't change.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning. Way, hey, and up she rises. Way, hey, and up she rises. Way, hey, and up she rises. Early in the morning. Putting in the longboat until he's sober. Putting in the longboat.
The sailor sandwich. It's something your grandma's been taking you to get at the same spot since you were a little kid. That is, if you're from Richmond.
It's a grilled rye with spicy mustard, grilled pastrami, and Swiss cheese with a knockwurst on top.
Grilled, delicious, big.
It's a lot of meat.
And like so many things in the River City, the sailor sandwich is a unique cultural phenomenon on its own. It's rarely found outside of Richmond, but it's on the menu of some of the most historic restaurants in the city.
We are Richmond's oldest restaurant. We've been here since 1929. I think people appreciate it for a couple of reasons. The first is it's very tasty. The knockwurst and the pastrami lend itself to each other. They balance themselves really well. So it's tasty, but I think there's a lot of tradition behind it too. I'll have people walk in that I can tell haven't been in here in maybe 10 years. They're kind of looking around and I can tell what they're in here for, and I'll say, you want a sailor sandwich with potato salad? And they'll say yes.
If you Google sailor sandwich and look at the Wikipedia page, it will confirm that the sandwich was in fact invented at a deli in Richmond, Virginia.
It's actually our most ordered item probably, so we get a lot of them.
Thanks, Chef Mike. Let's step into the kitchen and see how it's made. Throw that bread on the grill and get that knockwurst going. Pastrami on. Listen to this sizzle. Slam that Swiss cheese right down on top. Let it ride. Bread in the salamander. Meat in the salamander. This is gonna finish it off. Take 5. Bread stacked. This sandwich is open-faced. Hot mustard. Make 'em kiss. Add the cherry on top. I love it when a plan comes together.
That is a sailor sandwich.
Demetrius Sipsis, owner of the New York Deli, says they were the first restaurant to serve the sandwich. So, what's the story?
In 1943, when the Brandeis owned it, the University of Richmond had a V12 program, which I think was like a young sailors training type program during the war. They would come in here with their paychecks and they would spend their money. They put it together, and the Austrian woman would call back, another sandwich for the sailors, another sandwich for the sailors. She'd keep calling that back. So then it morphed into sailor sandwich from that.
Wikipedia credits the New York Deli as the original creator of the sandwich. But can a sandwich so easily be claimed to one restaurant? Or like a hamburger, are there different stories of genesis?
We have the menus that show up on the wall right there that show we are the oldest place with it. If anyone has a menu that has it on there older, please bring it by and I'll stand corrected. But nobody has menus with it older than we do. And most people that are alive and that were in the program have come in here and have told me, yes, that's where it was created and how it was created. So I've talked to some of the old vets and old sailors that have come in here, and that's what they've said. There's the menus right up there, you know. How much more proof do you need?
But others in town say different.
created up in Baltimore on the docks, where one day somebody had some hot dogs and somebody else had some pastrami sandwiches, and they were looking for something different because they've been eating the same thing every day, so somebody just combined them and made something brand new, and all of a sudden everybody loved it. And that's what I heard where it came from.
Now, if we believed everything we read on the internet, then we would say that the New York Deli made it for sure. However, the original Chaka's was opened in 1952. Mario Chaka, the owner, had 3 grandchildren who all opened delis of their own.
From what I understand is they all pronounced them a little bit differently so you'd know which one you were going to. One was Chaka's, one was Chiaka's, and one was Chioka's. And you would go to one of the Chaka's to get a Reuben sandwich, you would go to one of them to get a sailor sandwich, and you go to another one to get a pizza pie.
According to this story, the sandwich is considered a depression food, something you made by throwing together whatever you had during the Great Depression. It was born as a cheap snack on the Baltimore dock, which makes more sense given the name and considering that Richmond is landlocked.
I mean, you know, which side are you on the sailor sandwich battle? I've never heard anybody that's a fan of New York Deli come in here and say, oh, we created it. I've always heard it was created up in Baltimore, in the docks, the shipyards.
So which side are we on? Whichever side you choose, either would agree the sailor sandwich is a Richmond tradition.
You hear people come in from all over the place and they've never even heard of it.
I don't think I knew what it was before I moved here.
You know, so I think the sailor sandwich is a very unique to this area, whether just the East Coast or just in Virginia or not. I don't think it's out west. I don't think it's down south. I don't think it's up north. I think most people that come in say, what is this sailor? I don't understand what this sailor sandwich is. So a lot of people try it out just because it's something different that they're not used to. It's very unique, it's very different.
I would say that it's eclectic. Pastrami and Swiss is a sandwich by itself, as is a knockwurst sandwich. Richmond has really kind of a diverse crowd that's growing, and so I think that you know, it's just this kind of mesh of stuff coming together, plus the fact that it's steeped in tradition from the University of Richmond with the sailors and the vibrant history of Richmond.
People just grew up with it here, and they've always had a sailor sandwich on the menu wherever they go, as long, you know, most people stay in their hometown. So I guess growing up, it's just never expanded anywhere. There's probably sailor sandwiches in other cities, but I would imagine it's mostly known for being around the Richmond area. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just such a, like I said, an old school kind of thing that people have grown up with it. That's what they're used to, and Richmond is such a small, big city. You know, it wants to grow, but it also doesn't want to change either. So I think that's the way a lot of the mentality of the people growing up in Richmond feel like.
Overall, it's a great sandwich. Definitely come back for another one.
What shall we do with a drunken sailor? What shall we do with a drunken sailor? What shall we do with a drunken sailor? Early in the morning, way up she rises, way up she rises, way up she rises. Early in the morning, put him in a longboat till he's sober. Put him in a longboat till he's sober. Put him in a longboat till he's sober. Early in the morning, way up she rises, way up she rises, way up.
Joining me now are Robertson School students and documentary producers Irena Shun, Gessler Santos Lopez, and Laith Sanjak. You know, you teased us with these sandwiches every week when you would come in while working on this doc. Exactly how many sandwiches, Irena, did you eat during the making of this?
So we actually got to eat 6 sandwiches. All the restaurants were really, really generous. We got 4 sandwiches from the New York Deli and 2 sandwiches from Chaka's. and they were all delicious.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you which one was best because they're all watching, I'm sure. So, and I know they're all great anyway. So, Gessler, let me ask you, what is it actually like working visually with food? Was that a challenge? I know because you're trying to make it look as good as possible, right?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is just not trying to eat it myself, just because I love food. But I think making food look good is a craft in itself. Like you gotta light it perfectly so the meat looks juicy, the cheese looks melty, the bread looks toasted. So you gotta make it visually appealing because that's the only way people are gonna see it. They can't taste it themselves, so you gotta make them want it. So, yeah. And
the voice of this doc, of course, was next to you, Laith, who that was a good read. I enjoyed that. Let me ask you, you sort of broached the topic of where in the world did this sandwich originate. Richmond claims it. There was a little bit of doubt thrown in on that. What do you think?
Honestly, I think that is a question better left unanswered because, well, it distracts from the real heart of the sandwich, which is that it's a Richmond tradition, and that even if it is from Baltimore, say somewhere else, who knows, it could be from any deli in America, when you travel around the country, you find it in Richmond, mostly. I mean, I've been hard-pressed to find it anywhere else. So.
You've got a future in politics. Seriously, though, I mean, when you do something on a sandwich, a documentary, that's kind of a limited topic. Did that sort of present challenges in and of itself?
I think food has an origin in itself. I think food is culture and culture is food. So I think if you have a stable food, I guess you can find the history behind it and you can add that story into it. So it wasn't too hard.
Okay, yeah. Well, you did a good job anyway. I'm ready to go out and get one. Once again, I've been talking with documentary producers Irena Shun, Gessler Santos Lopez, and Laith Sanjak. Thanks for a good dinner suggestion tonight, guys.
Thanks again, Dr. Oglesby, and all of the documentary students. That does it for this edition of VCU In Depth, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tina Harding.
And I'm Will Hicks. From all of us at VCU In Depth, good night.